I've never seen a movie that pisses me off more than Peter Pan and Wendy. A movie so pointless, so unnecessary, and so bad it misses the mark of the original, especially compared to other live-action adaptations. But folks, there's no way to be around the bush. Lilo & Stitch is a god-awful remake, and the people who made it need some major realignment and creativity. Originally, I was planning to make a video discussing the potential a Lilo & Stitch live-action remake even had, but sadly I waited too long, and now I'm facing the consequences of my procrastination. A video like that probably wouldn't have changed much anyway, and I had high hopes for this movie. But my expectations were crushed the moment I heard that Gantu isn't in the movie. With over 20 more minutes of runtime, I was surely capable of experiencing far more suffering than usual. And boy did I ever. This movie is awful. But I don't think it could have been. Let me explain. Hi, I'm Matty Abraham, an artist on the internet and an avid enjoyer of Hawaiian roller coaster rides. Mostly. For the past decade, I've indulged in a handful of Disney's live-action remakes and comparing them to their original counterparts while also at least trying to enjoy them for what they are. Something that's become a lot more difficult as Disney has produced miss after miss after miss. And what sucks is that I think that some of these have had great potential to be adapted into live action. But sadly, Disney has become so creatively bankrupt they forgot what made some of these movies so mesmerizing in the first place. At the time of writing and even recording, I had just watched the live-action Lilo & Stitch remake, and it somehow infuriated me to a point where I had to talk about it. As a kid, I was a huge fan of Lilo & Stitch. I'd watch the previews, my aunt and my parents would get me the DVDs of both it and its sequels. I even had the 2-disc Big Wave edition so that I could create my own experiments and race geckos with David. And my first moment of conquering fear came in the form of me watching Stitch has glitch enough times to not be scared of it anymore. Don't ask why I was, I don't even know why either. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Today, I'm going to discuss the ever-growing issue of Disney's live-action remakes based on the ones I've seen. Keep in mind that I've only seen a solid 43% of them, so half of what I say in this video shouldn't be taken as gospel. I'm also not exactly the most qualified individual on this topic, given as there's a bunch of iconic Disney movies I still have yet to see. So please don't pull out your pitchforks and torches when I say I haven't watched Tarzan, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or even Hercules. But if you are interested in hearing what I have to say, feel free to keep watching. And with all that said, let's get into it. The concept of live-action Disney remakes have been a thing since the 90s with the release of a live-action Jungle Book movie, where in it, Mowgli's story expands, going from being a boy raised by wild animals to becoming a man who becomes king of the jungle or something, I don't know, I didn't watch the movie. And with a budget of $30 million and a return of $70 million, the movie wasn't necessarily successful, but it still got positive reception, based on what I've read about it at least. Apparently, this movie adapts both the Jungle Book and the second Jungle Book, which I didn't even know was even a thing until I did my research on it. Even if the movie was or wasn't successful, it didn't stop Disney from remaking another classic at the time in the form of 101 Dalmatians and a sequel to that film, 102 Dalmatians. Afterwards, they don't seem to have attempted remakes again for about a decade when Disney released Alice in Wonderland. A movie that serves as a remake in some aspects, but as far as I've heard, serves more as a sequel to the original movie, which actually sounds like it opens the door for more creative storytelling. Despite the fact that most Disney movies have straight-to-video sequels, some good, some bad, taking those IPs and continuing them with a much more mature tone sounds like it could actually do well. This mentality, however, doesn't carry over to any preceding remakes, but the ones discussed in this segment have shown to have actual care and effort behind them. This leads us to 2015's Cinderella remake. Now my friends know I loved this remake far more than the original, and I might also be a little bit biased given that I saw this movie on my 13th birthday way back when. Man, I just realized I saw this movie a decade ago. I am getting old. At the time, there was just something about it that had the magic of Disney behind it, and I never knew why until I was an adult. As a kid, I remember always wanting to watch the original Cinderella, but doing so would probably make other kids make fun of me because the movie's made for girls or whatever. But after seeing it, I liked it. Though I can't remember if I saw it before or after the remake, but watching one after another, the remake has some genuine improvements. My main complaint about the original was that a bit too much time was spent with the mice and their shenanigans, which even though they helped drive the story, it was still a bit too much for my liking. But if you look at the runtime compared to the remake, you'll see that the remake is 31 minutes longer than the original version. You want to know what they do with that extra time? They make you care about the characters more by fleshing out their dynamics and giving each moment room to breathe. The prince especially gets more screen time. Another complaint about the original was that the prince was barely in the movie and was as bland as a plank of wood. But in the remake, you see him have more screen time with Ella. They give him a name, a personality, a reason to invite every woman in the kingdom to the gala. He's not just doing it for the kingdom, but also using it as a ploy to find the girl that he met in the woods. And after encountering her, he doesn't even think twice, he just goes straight for her. They dance, they connect to one another, he shows her his secret garden, and overall, their chemistry feels genuine and real. They also show more of a relationship between him, the king, and some of the castle staff. In the original, the king is depicted as an angry goofball who's so desperate for grandchildren he doesn't even care who his son ends up with so long as he's able to tap some. He's also the one who orders for every woman in the kingdom to attend the royal ball in the original version. In the remake, however, he's a bit more stern. He loves his son and he definitely means well, but he insists that his son marries a princess for the good of the kingdom. But in his dying breath, he tells his son to find the girl that he met at the ball and marry for love, making his death feel all the more tragic, yet earned. This amount of care is also applied to Ella herself, as the movie opens showing her happy childhood with her family. Ella's backstory takes up 15 minutes of the movie's runtime, and all that time spent makes you sympathize for her after seeing the loss of both of her parents, especially after Lady Tremaine enters the picture. The amount of care given to this movie isn't just in the storytelling, but also in the film's production. The movie had a budget of $90 million, and you can tell that they made the most of what they were given, designing costumes, outfits, and building real sets instead of filming in front of a green screen. Like, look at all these candles. These are all real candles on real chandeliers. The movie especially uses very minimal CGI. The only places you really see it are with the mice and the transformation scenes. Cinderella's ball gown had LEDs in it to make it look more elegant and magical. Additionally, the movie was shot on a film camera to make the colors more vibrant and saturated. With perfect casting, top-notch acting, and storytelling that improves every single aspect of the original, this remake feels like someone's passion project, something that you'll notice doesn't particularly carry over to any preceding remakes. Another good one would probably be 2016's remake of The Jungle Book, not to be confused with the one from the 90s. Remember that camera trick I mentioned about 2 sentences ago? Well, that hasn't really carried over. From here on out, every remake is shot on digital cameras. And yet some scenes in this movie still look rich and vibrant in color. Not that I really expect much from a movie set in the jungle. They also had to use green screens because obviously they're not going to stick a child in a jungle and surround him with real wild animals. But in spite of that, they managed to make a pretty good movie. From what I remember in the original, Mowgli was more or less just a kid living in the jungle who didn't want to go to the man village. But here, they expand his character by making him more inventive. There's an entire scene dedicated to him trying to knock down honeybee hives for Baloo. The first attempt goes as well as you'd expect. Sloppy. But later on, he tries it again while wearing a protective suit made out of leaves, a vine swing, and a sawtooth leaf at the end of a long stick, using only things you'd find in the jungle. But these tricks, as the animals call it, is what drives Shere Khan's motives to want to kill Mowgli, as one day he might become smart enough to make man's red flower, which is just fire. This drives the conflict to feel much more climatic than the original. Mowgli runs all the way to the man village to grab a torch in order to stand up to Shere Khan. In doing so, he accidentally starts a fire in the jungle, but using his ingenuity, Mowgli lures Shere Khan into the fire using a dead tree to make him fall into it. Then immediately afterwards, Mowgli gets help from the elephants that create a path from the river to the jungle, effectively putting the fires out. Whereas in the original, lightning struck a tree branch, lighting it on fire, and Mowgli somehow ties it to Shere Khan's tail and calls it a day. If you haven't caught on by now, this is how you justify longer runtimes, by making changes that effectively improve the story and the characters. An honorable mention of this effect would be Lady in the Tramps remake. They spend more time fleshing out the dynamics, making you feel for Lady's relationship with Jim Deere and Darling, as well as Lady's relationship with the baby, who actually has a name in this version, being Lulu. But the best changes made to the characters would be the Tramp. They had a whole scene dedicated to showing how Tramp had a home, a family, one that chose to abandon him the moment a baby entered the picture. This was the most heartbreaking change in the movie for me. It's no wonder he's so standoffish towards the idea of having a family with a baby. But once he saves Lulu from the rat, like in the original, you get to see Jim Deere and Darling's gratitude once they Fuck you, Joy-Cons. But once he saves Lulu from a rat, just like in the original, you get to see Jim Deere and Darling's gratitude once they save him in return, making them take him home with them on the spot. This made Tramp have his own arc in the movie, and seeing it all unfold made it feel all the more rewarding. Not to mention, the movie was also shot as practically as they could, with the only CGI being on the dogs whenever they talk. If Disney had kept this level of heart and creativity into the equation, they would have had a bit more positive reception regarding the remakes. But sadly, we don't live in that timeline. So this is where we address some problems these remakes have. What you'll notice is that I spent a good few minutes holding remakes that make changes in high regard. Especially if said changes make the longer runtimes in these remakes feel justified. However, the shift in quality would become far more prominent the further down the line we go. Let's start with Beauty and the Beast. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. If you want my honest opinion, the movie's fucking boring. In the opening minutes of the original movie, you're greeted with stunning visuals, breathtaking music, and a basic rundown of the Beast's backstory and what's at stake. The opening minutes of the remake, however, don't exactly pack the same punch in the visual department, but they spend more time showing the Beast and his staff actually getting cursed. A change like that can drastically improve the unspoken implications of the original version, I guess, but unlike Cinderella, this makes the opening backstory 3 minutes longer and not 15. which doesn't make the longer runtime feel too justified. Can't say that's the only reason the movie is longer though. A problem you'll also see the more we go along is piss poor casting. In this movie, you have Emma Watson playing Belle. Sure, she looks the part, but she doesn't sound the part. You all know why. It's because she can't sing for shit, and she's been auto-tuned like crazy in this movie. The next movie that has some of these problems would be 2019's Aladdin. Dull visuals, poor casting, and unjustified changes making the movie longer. In the visual department alone, all you gotta do is look at the Cave of Wonders between the two versions. Like, it is literally night and day between the two. The casting is just as baffling having Will Smith as the genie. Now, I like Will Smith as much as the next guy, but he just doesn't have the same oomph when it comes to playing the genie. He has nice vocal cords, I'll give him that, but otherwise I just can't shake the feeling that he's just doing this role for the paycheck. Same can be said for the guy who plays Jafar. When I hear the name Jafar, I think of someone who looks downright evil and acts like a devious snake. This Jafar just looks like a guy. They made more unnecessary changes by not just giving the genie a love interest, but also giving Jasmine her own musical number about not being silenced. Like, was that even established to be a thing in the movie? Jasmine in the original movie was never silenced, so why should I act like that's a problem in this movie? Jasmine in the original took no bull from nobody and actually stood her ground against the guards, the Sultan, and even Jafar. Okay, so Aladdin was very good. What else is there? Well, I guess there's also the Lion King remake, and this isn't even live action. This is just more expensive, worse looking animation. I've said on a few occasions that I don't really like the Lion King all that much, but watching this movie, it made me want to leave to do something else. But I gotta admit, the original movie at least has some visual flair to it. Animals are expressive, colors look vibrant, and each cast member fits perfectly in their roles. Here, however, animals look much less expressive, the colors look bland, and this is honestly a problem with Hollywood as a whole, they don't hire voice actors, they hire celebrities. For the most part, this remake is nearly identical to the original, and yet some things were cut in favor of seeing a beetle push around a literal turd.
Awesome, good, love that I'm looking at that.
And let's not forget, despite the movie's insistence on being quote-unquote live action, it held the title for highest grossing animated movie for 5 whole years. Thankfully, that title has since been claimed by Inside Out 2 and then later on Ne Zha 2. So Disney doesn't even hold the crown anymore, but I digress. Okay, Mulan. Now I stated on a live stream that Mulan is one of, if not my favorite movie from the Disney Renaissance. So you'd think a movie so beloved and praised would be easy to make into live action. Well, no, that's not what they did. Instead of adapting the original animated version to live action, they changed so much that this Mulan might as well just be its own thing. Full disclosure, I've never seen this movie, but in my days of watching reviews on YouTube, I've heard terrible things about it. They make Mulan herself a Mary Sue by giving her chi, which essentially means they just gave her the Force from Star Wars. Remember how in the original they made Mulan an actual flawed character who couldn't do things on her own right away, but found her own way to do it by using her brain? Yeah, me too. They reportedly cut Mushu from the remake in order to make the movie more grounded and serious instead of keeping it lighthearted and fun. Remember how in the original, Mushu, while being the comic relief of the movie, also knew when to be serious when the soldiers sang a goofy little song and got hit with the reality of war? Yeah, me too. Speaking of the songs, apparently they made it so grounded in reality, they cut the songs entirely so that nobody sings a single note, not one. Remember how the original had songs that actually moved the plot and characters forward, as well as giving the characters personality beyond the surface level? Yeah, me too. This is all just what I've heard. I haven't even touched the villains, the messages, or the fact that they filmed in concentration camps. I can't properly critique a movie I've never watched. As I stated in the previous segment, I don't mind longer runtimes if it means the movie does something to justify the change and improve the story. But here, however, the changes don't justify their inclusions or improve the overall quality. The changes make it worse. And due to the COVID pandemic, this movie was apparently delayed and just dumped onto Disney Plus, which means nobody cared to see it. A trend that'll become all the more prominent as we go along. So this is where things start to get messy. As Disney greenlit and produced more and more sequels, the more baffling it got as time went on. The main problem you start to notice with these remakes is oversaturation. In 2019 alone, we had Dumbo, Aladdin, The Lion King, Lady and the Tramp, and to some extent Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. That's 5 movies being remade and one of them is a sequel. And apart from The Lion King and maybe Aladdin, it didn't seem like these movies were all that successful at the box office. And since then, it seemed like once a year Disney would crank out another remake, each one having more backlash than the last. Mulan was already mentioned, so I guess the next place to discuss the Disney remake downfall will be 2022's Pinocchio. The problems with this movie begin when they show literal horse shit in the movie. Like, why? Disney, we know your movies are bad, you're just becoming self-aware at this point. The next problem that arises comes in the form of Pinocchio not having any character flaws. He seemingly knows what's right and what's wrong, which makes you wonder why Jiminy Cricket is in the movie. In the scene where Pinocchio's nose grew, only half the statements he made were lies, but then when he told the truth, his nose still grew for some reason. He said he wanted to go to school, and he did. We see him go there, but he got kicked out for no reason. And yet when Pinocchio said that, his nose still grew. He also seemingly had no interest in Pleasure Island. When he escapes Stromboli, we see him just want to go home, but gets swept up by the coachman. There's an entire song about peer pressure in that scene sung by the coachman. Pinocchio still had doubts about going to Pleasure Island, but only went because, well, what other choice did he have? And when he gets there, he doesn't engage in anything except for one long boat ride and a few sips of root beer, which is a non-alcoholic drink as many before me have said. And Pinocchio, for some reason, still gets donkey ears and a tail, facing the consequences for things he didn't do. In the original version, Pinocchio was having the time of his life on Pleasure Island, breaking stuff, smoking cigars, and drinking beer, which earns him those ears and tail. He gets so hammered that Disney themselves made a PSA against the dangers of smoking, especially to young children. In the remake, however, the kids don't smoke or drink, rather they just eat junk food and drink root beer, which aren't inherently bad things, just bad for ya. And in Pinocchio's case, the consequences don't even last, as the ears and tail vanish before the third act, so why punish him with the ears and tails at all? But above all else, the main problem with this remake is that another live-action Pinocchio adaptation exists in the form of The Adventures of Pinocchio. A movie with all the same story beats, but you see them make changes that improve the story like I alluded to earlier by fleshing the characters out. Even in the animated department, another movie released the same year being Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, a stop-motion movie that's actually a passion project that tells a story so impactful it won the Oscar for Best Animated Film. Next came Peter Pan and Wendy, and oh boy did this movie piss me the hell off. For one thing, they took Wendy and made her a complete girl boss with nary a shred of femininity whose happy thought is to grow up old and alone. In the original, they show her wanting to go home and have genuine concern that her brothers John and Michael were forgetting their parents. Here, however, Wendy seems to only want to go home because she had one adventure, got mad, bored, and wanted to leave. The next problem isn't one I particularly care about, but remakes seem to have a habit of race-swapping characters. For this movie, they race-swapped Tinkerbell by having her played by a black actress. For me, it's only a problem because I don't see Tinkerbell anymore. This is just her life fairy friend Aradessa. And then there's the Lost Boys, where in the trailer they show that they're not all boys. This is a problem because in the original fairy tale, they state that the Lost Boys are children who follow their parents when the nurse is not looking, and after 7 days, they're sent to Neverland. Girls, however, are much too clever to follow their parents simply because girls mature faster than boys do, so it doesn't make sense that there be any lost girls in Neverland. What's it saying again? When you try appealing to everybody, you end up appealing to nobody? Yeah, that just fits this movie to a T, doesn't it? And last but not least, Captain Hook. Remember how in my last video I said there's always gotta be some form of sympathy for the villains? Well, this movie is a prime example, as in this movie, Peter and James Hook were friends with each other when James was so young. Then one day, he missed his mother and asked Peter to take him home. After Peter refused, James tried sailing back, which ultimately didn't work, and he was raised by pirates and eventually grew up. Then one day, James came back to Peter, and after seeing what he had become, Peter cut off his hand and fed it to a crocodile. Like, bro, your friend got homesick and became a pirate as a result, all because of you. This makes Peter Pan look like the villain in his own movie. Now, I like the idea of Peter and Hook being friends and becoming sworn enemies. I'm someone who likes the movie Pan after all, but the way they handled it here was just way too extra. But the biggest problem with this movie is that it had no reason to exist at all, because just 20 years prior, Universal released their own Peter Pan adaptation, and it was so much better. Colors are vibrant, characters feel real, and overall, it's just a better movie. My words can't even do it justice, just go watch it for yourself, I highly recommend it. There also exist other movies that adapt the Peter Pan fairy tale and do their own thing, like with Hook from the 90s and Pan from 2015. Speaking of things that have no reason to exist, Mufasa the Lion King, a movie that's both a prequel and a sequel to the 2019 movie. The general consensus is that this movie is bad. It reveals that Mufasa is Scar's adopted brother and Mufasa himself stole the throne from Scar. And apparently they made Scar to an incel because he fell in love with Sarabi when Sarabi fell in love with Mufasa. Damn, bro stole the throne and his coochie. Not to mention, this movie released on the same day as Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and everyone memed about Disney being outclassed by Sonic of all things. Now before moving on, I very quickly want to address the Little Mermaid remake. The main thing people took issue with when it comes to this remake is the race swapping of Ariel, and while I wanted to see Ariel as a redhead, I don't really care about this issue. It also apparently made Ariel yet another girl boss who don't need no man, which severely misunderstood the point of the source material. I mainly didn't watch this one because I didn't want to listen to Scuttlebutt. I suppose with the topic of race swapping means now we gotta talk about Snow White. Now, a live-action Snow White quickly received scrutiny the moment it was announced, and once the cast was revealed, people were furious. Having Rachel Zegler, a woman with brown skin, play Snow White when the original fairy tale describes her as having skin as white as snow was not going to gel well with audiences. Rachel's interviews didn't particularly help matters, seeing as she didn't really like the original movie, finding it scary, misunderstanding the story by calling the prince a stalker, and disrespecting co-stars by saying that the prince could get cut, thus making this movie about female empowerment. Rachel alone turned many audiences away, thus making herself and this movie the biggest laughingstock / punching bag in Hollywood, and was a massive PR nightmare for Disney. They also showed disrespect to the dwarfism community by making the 7 dwarves CGI animated instead of hiring actual little people. Thanks a lot, Peter Dinklage. All of these problems made Snow White Disney's biggest box office bomb. They canceled press tours, pulled it from cinemas, and apparently led to some behind-the-scenes drama with Rachel Zegler that I don't have time to go over. Let me be clear, I'm not someone who cares about Snow White. Sure, the original made an impact on the industry, but I've only seen half of it 9 years ago. That said, odds are I'm not going to care about the remake. I can make fun of it, I can say how many people it offends, but I'm probably never going to watch it. And last, but certainly not least, we have Disney's remake of Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch was one of Disney's most grounded and realistic movies, despite the fact that the movie had aliens in it. It was the story of a genetic experiment hell-bent on destruction befriending a human outcast and realizing that destruction is meaningless and that there's more to life than that. On the flip side, the story is also about 2 sisters trying to keep what's left of their family together after their parents die in a car wreck. After Lilo meets Stitch, you get to see the 2 bond, connect, and also see Nani struggling to keep Lilo with her as it gets more and more difficult. Using the story of the ugly duckling as a metaphor for Stitch's current predicament, eventually a lost alien learns that Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. So guess how much of that they kept in the remake? The movie opens at a much faster pace than the original, with the shot changing every 5 seconds. The original had the first 10 minutes centered around the aliens before taking us to Hawaii. Here, however, that time is cut in half, giving us 0 room to breathe or process the events of the opening. The remake is longer than the original, by the way, so what did they do to fill in that time? For one thing, they have Stitch crash a wedding where they needle drop Uptown Funk in 2025. Okay. The pacing of the movie moves way too fast for a movie that's longer than its animated counterparts. Now I somehow made it through this entire video without mentioning the mixed bag that is child acting, because child acting is the one thing you'll never hear me complain about. But here, my main issue isn't that the young actress playing Lilo isn't bad, they just don't establish much of her weird tendencies she had in the original. They don't even properly build a relationship between her and her sister Nani. They try to, but the pacing, man. They never give you any time to breathe, and any somber moment is immediately interrupted by jokes that don't land. And because they spend so little time establishing a relationship between the 2 sisters, you kinda get the feeling that maybe they don't even want to stay together. Lilo even says as much in the movie. She wants Nani to go to college and pursue marine biology, and Nani tries her absolute damnedest to refuse. Once Stitch enters the picture, you start to see Nani become more and more tired of trying the more Stitch does just about anything. And then Jumba gives pursuit, and here's where I start to lose it. They made Jumba the main villain of the movie. Lilo and Stitch was a movie that didn't necessarily have a villain. Jumba was an antagonist, sure, but he was more misunderstood and persuaded to change his ways. Here, however, he's just a straight up villain who didn't even care about who he hurts or anything. He even goes out of his way to destroy all of Lilo's stuff, just because, I guess. The other antagonists provided tension in the story, sure, but they were never really evil, just people doing their jobs. Gantu was sent to Earth when Jumba and quickly became unreliable and was able to capture Lilo and Stitch with ease. Too bad he's not in this movie. Cobra, again, was mainly just doing his job. He wasn't a bad guy, just someone who genuinely wanted to help. He wanted what was best for the 2 sisters. He didn't even want to split them up, and after the movie, he became a member of the family as sort of a father figure. In the remake, they somehow split him into 2 characters, the CIA agent and the social worker, who's a completely separate character now. The social worker is played by Tia Carrere, one of the returning actors alongside the Grand Councilwoman and Stitch himself. And for those who don't know, she was the original voice actress for Nani. And that just begs the question, why the fuck is the original voice actress for Nani playing the social worker when she herself knows how much Nani struggles? That just doesn't work. I guess they wanted her to play the social worker to have a character understand Nani's struggles in this movie? Can't say I ever felt that Nani was anything other than annoyed though. And I think they're aware of that because by the end of the movie, we see Nani just give up and let them take Lilo into foster care, which is undermined by her winding up just next door to live with David and his grandma. They just completely misunderstood the point of the original ending. Ohana means family, but family means nothing in this movie. And they undermined that ending too by having Nani just go to college but be able to go home on a whim whenever she wants because I guess she just has Jumba's portal gun now. Which pretty much renders all of her efforts, all of her worries, all of the stakes in the movie, all of that completely meaningless. There's no lasting consequences, no tension, no nothing. So you've effectively just wasted almost 2 hours watching this movie. And the worst part, people are still paying money to watch it. I'm not happy with this movie. I don't think anyone who cares about the original is happy with this movie. To reiterate, Disney has produced miss after miss after miss, and I think the low box office returns and audience backlash is starting to catch on. Reportedly, Disney has put a pause on live-action remakes after the low returns of Snow White and the mixed reception of Lilo & Stitch. However, on April 3rd, 2023, they announced a live-action Moana remake with Dwayne Johnson returning as Maui. And no, this is not an elaborate April Fool's hoax. I thought it was too, seeing as my birthday is on April 3rd and people tend to make jokes saying how close I was to being born on that day. But set photos exist. It's a thing they're doing. At current, Moana as a movie is 8.5 years old. Not even a decade, and the remake was announced 2 years ago. Moana also has a sequel and apparently another one on the horizon. With all that in mind, you're probably wondering why remake it at all? Well, the answer is simple. Disney is so creatively bankrupt that any originality is either never given the care needed to tell a good story or is just dumped onto streaming. Apparently, there were rumors going around saying that they were going to remake my favorite Disney movie, Tangled, and if the reports of them halting production are false, they wouldn't stop there. They would eventually make a live-action Zootopia, a live-action Wreck-It Ralph, a live-action Frozen, all with fixes to problems that don't exist and drastically misunderstanding the originals. They would probably even try remaking movies that didn't do so well the first time. Atlantis, Treasure Planet, maybe even Strange World or Wish. Eventually, they would have nothing left, especially since these movies cost way more money to make but they wind up losing money. Why would you want to spend $170 million making a bad remake when for just as much, if not less, you could be creating your next big hit? Disney as a company doesn't take risks. They take the safe route, and there's only so many times you can rely on old properties before the well eventually runs dry. What's that one thing Walt Disney himself said?
We keep moving forward, opening new doors, and doing new things, because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. All our dreams can come true, if we have the courage to pursue them.
It's become a slogan that the company has failed to grasp in recent years, and if Walt was able to see what's become of his company, he'd be rolling in his grave. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to tell Disney what we want in our movies. Movies shouldn't exist to deliver a message, Rachel. Movies should exist to tell a story, allow us to escape reality, even for a moment. It should give kids someone to relate to and aspire to be, and allow young artists to tell their own stories and create something extraordinary. With all that said, that's all from me today, but now I want to hear from you. Do any of you have a favorite movie, Disney or otherwise? If so, let me know what it is. My comments are wide open. Think really hard about what that movie is and pour your heart out as to why you adore it so much. As usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to hear more of my yapping in the future. But until next time, bye!